Wrestling fans, my name is Kris Kloss, and this is Cali's finest, interviewing California's legends and superstars alike. This series exclusively brought to you by the Wrestling Chatter YouTube channel. If you haven't done so, like, comment, share, and subscribe. The more great subscribers we get, the more awesome content we can bring to you. Now, on this episode of Cali's Finest, I have the pleasure of sitting down to one of the most famous ones, Famous B. That's right, Famous B. Now, this guy and I, we became friends outside of the ring and worked together on countless different events throughout the state of California. He gets into all that, how he started, his involvement with XPW, MexPW, Lucha VaVoom, Lucha Las Vegas, and Lucha Underground. This guy has done so much, and he shares that. And man, Famous B doing so much in his professional career in such a short amount of time. It is pretty awesome. Once again, fans, my name is Kris Kloss, inviting you to join us on this new series on the Wrestling Chatter YouTube channel, Cali's Finest. Enjoy. Famous B, welcome to the Wrestling Chatter YouTube channel. Famous B, welcome to Cali's Finest.
Well, you know what? Thank you so much. I am so excited. It is me. I am here live in living color. Mr. 423 Get Fame himself is here, Chris. It's an honor to be here, brother.
Oh, my goodness. Hey, I couldn't have said that better. I don't think anybody could have said that better. Famous B, the honor is all mine. And on behalf of everybody watching, tuning in to see yourself, I want to say thank you. And thank you for all the fans for being here on the Wrestling Chatter, for checking out Cali's Finest. This is our second episode, so we are getting our feet wet here. And our first guest, of course, the legendary Jesse Hernandez. That was a great show. If you haven't seen that, check that full episode out. And we are rolling right along here with episode number 2 with the second letter of the alphabet, Famous B. How fitting is that? So
it's very fitting, and I'll take it one step further. I was born on the 2nd. My birthday is August 2nd, 1985. So it works out perfectly. Look at that. It's synchronicity, Chris. It was meant to be.
That's yes. Namaste. So wait a minute. What the 2nd of what month?
August.
Okay, August. All right. So, all right, man. Well, I'm February, so we're about 6 months apart there. So, okay. And man, and I'll take it another step further. The last time I saw you was in the month of August. The second time we're seeing each other now is the month of February. So
right. And if I remember, it was on the 22nd too. Because I remember specifically it being the 22nd because of an event that I had going on or something I had to do that day. So I remember specifically it was the 22nd. So 2-2. Yeah. 2's all across the board.
Yeah, which we actually just passed 2's across the board, February 2nd, 2022.
Right.
So were you speaking of California, and you know, I got to know you a few years ago, well after I was done doing XPW, and then XPW 2.0 rolled around. We'll get into that. Right. And Wrestling Society X and all I was doing at the time, but then I met you maybe a couple years after that. Now, right. Before we get into you starting in the business, B, were you originally from LA?
That is correct. Originally from LA. Was born in West Hollywood, actually. West Hollywood, Kaiser, La Cienega, and Cadillac, to be exact. Okay. Yeah, man, 1985, August 2nd. So yeah, originally from LA, born and raised, and I really didn't do much traveling until I actually got into business. But other than that, I've always been a LA city boy.
So during WrestleMania 9, WrestleMania 1, you were in the womb.
I was baking. That is correct. I was baking.
Down there, yeah.
I was getting ready to come out and be famous. The world's getting ready to know me. So yeah, that is correct.
Yeah, Mother B must have walked by a TV. You could hear the Hogan and Mr. P.
Either that or I was in the womb going like this. Like, what is that? What is that?
Right.
Yeah. WrestleMania is just a couple of months older than myself. Yeah.
Unbelievable, dude. So if you growing up in LA, when did you, besides being in the womb, when did you consciously know? How old were you? When did it really happen that, were you watching on TV or whatever, that you knew that you wanted to be a part of this? Or that you loved it, you had the bug, the wrestling bug or whatever.
Right. Well, you know what? I was always gravitated to wrestling. I remember it was the first thing I can remember actually seeing on television. Most kids, they want to watch cartoons or what have you. Me, I wanted to watch wrestling. I remember sitting there as a young child, and I remember the first wrestler I ever saw from what I remember was Hillbilly Jim. So, and Captain Lou Albano and guys like that. So I couldn't have been no more than 2-3 years old. You know what I mean? So I was hooked ever since. I have a pretty good memory. So, just to remember those guys as my first, like I said, being born in 85, I probably was still in diapers running around. So that's when I first consciously became aware of professional wrestling. I was hooked ever since, been a fan ever since.
I mean, if you're talking Hillbilly Jim and you were born in 85, then that was pretty, like you said, man, that's pretty young, dude.
Yeah, I want to say probably 87-ish. I was probably about 2, maybe 2. Yeah.
I mean, wow. I mean, I guess, in a sense, it's not too surprising because that was the top of the wave back in the 80s, was like arguably like the peak, the pinnacle, 87.
Right.
So it was hard not to be around it in that time.
Right. Well, I guess, my parents was, because I was definitely looking up at the TV as a youngster, man, just idolizing these guys and, seeing Lou Albano with the long beard and like the rubber bands tied in his beard and things like that. And, just the different gimmicks, it just fascinated me. And, I was hooked, man. I was a fan. Those guys was larger than life to me. And, it's something in my soul. It's something in my spirit, I want to say, that gravitated towards it. I don't know, maybe I was hooked on it in a past life, who knows? But I came out the womb being just as fascinated. So that's why I say that it's something in my soul that just gravitated to the business. And to come full circle, or to come all this way and still be connected to it, that just lets you know right there that I have a very special connection with the business.
Yeah, we talked before, and as getting to become friends, and the whole idea of if it's a coincidence or if it's synchronistic, most likely it's synchronistic. There are very few coincidences. Yeah,
absolutely. Very few coincidences, if any at all, man.
Right?
I really don't prescribe to coincidences. I believe everything happens for a reason, one way or another.
Right. And did you okay, speaking of that, like knowing of that stuff so early, did you find it that people your age group, like you were kind of ahead of them? Like, how do you know that stuff from way back then? Like, you're supposed to know stuff from the 90s, being that you were born in the 80s. Did you kind of feel like kids at the time, let's say, or people your age, you felt like you knew a little bit more, like the history of it?
I would say so, but it was also a thing where it was something that it was like, I guess you could say, my guilty pleasure. It's like a saying that a lot of people say, nowadays, for something that, you're into that is personal to you. So I think at that time it was personal to me. By the time that I actually started talking about it with my peers, which would probably be like middle school or something like that, right? I was well beyond like I guess you could say the history of knowledge of what I knew. It was more or less, we were talking about what was presently happening. You know what I mean? So when you're that young, you don't really have anybody or anyone to compare it to.
Right.
unless it's just others in your household or something like that, or whatever the case may be. But what's funny is I became really the only one that was interested in it. You know, I had younger brothers and sisters, which was 6 years younger than me or whatnot, but they weren't as fascinated as I was. So I was the only one fighting for the remote, you know, fighting for TV time, you know, at certain integral points when the product was on. So, you know, it was one of those things where I didn't really have anyone else to compare it to, because I was watching it myself, you know, after a certain point, and I was the only one that was invested. And when I did start talking about it with peers or whatever, it probably was like around middle school, attitude era. So we were just caught up in the hype of everything at that point. So
that's great, man. And what a time to grow up.
Right.
What a time to grow up as a fan, you know.
Absolutely.
And speaking of growing up as a fan, speaking of an Angelino, fellow Angelino, and growing up in Los Angeles, going to shows. When was the first time you frequented any type of wrestling show? What was it? Was it WWF, WCW, or when and where was it?
Actually, yeah, I was a WWE, well, E at the time. When I was younger, I didn't really get the luxury of going to shows. I hardly even knew when they were in town. It was, you know, it was hard for me to actually, you know, as I got older and I started having responsibilities with my younger siblings and things like that, you know, single parent household or whatever the case may be, it was hard for me actually to engage it the way I wanted to, because I was fully invested. But to go to the shows, to get my mom to take me and to have time to do this, that, or the third, I wasn't able to. So it wasn't until like I actually got older and started working and started to make money for myself where I was able to actually pay for the things that I wanted to do. And the first thing I wanted to do was go to the show. So I was well older when I went to my first show. And yeah, it just blossomed from there in terms of attending events.
Do you remember when that was, the first show you attended?
I would say probably around, well, I know for sure one of the first shows I went to was WrestleMania 21.
Oh, okay,
back in 04, Staples Center. 05, yeah. Excuse me. Yeah, that was one of the first ones. So I would say no less than like a year prior to that, I probably went to a couple of TV tapings, Raw tapings, SmackDown tapings, Anaheim, maybe a house show in San Bernardino, something like that.
Okay.
But yeah, that was the start of it.
So you were a little too young. You never went to WWF when they were still at the LA Sports Arena.
Never did. Never got a chance to.
And you actually grew up not too far from the Forum, right?
No. Yeah. Actually, yeah, that is correct. I went to kindergarten at Kelso Elementary, which is right across the street from the Forum.
Wow, that's great. Yeah.
So when I was 5, 1990, the Showtime team of the Lakers would come up to the school to greet the kids, you know. So I was a little 5-year-old looking up at all these giant basketball players like, wow, Magic, Kareem, Byron, Michael Cooper, you know, those guys, you know.
Memories, dude. Yeah, best.
Man. Vlade Divac, all those guys, man. So yeah, man, I grew up right there, man, in Inglewood. You know, my grandmother, she lived in Inglewood for, man, pretty much all my life until she recently moved like the last couple of years. But yeah, man, I've always really been right there in the heart, in the middle of Inglewood, you know, right there where the new SoFi building is now.
Right. Okay. Wow. A lot of history. Wow. Interesting.
Right.
And of course, Hollywood Park used to be.
Correct.
So being that you didn't really weren't privy to it as a kid, and I understand that too. Like I look back when I was young and I knew wrestling, but then I look back like, wait a minute, why didn't I go to WrestleMania 2? Why didn't I even just bring it up to my family? It's just you're a young kid, you don't put the pieces together, you know. But you were right there by the Forum. And you didn't have any knowledge yet WCW was going to the Forum, right?
Right. I had no clue. Clue. Even though I was watching WCW as well, you know, early 90s and things like that, I had no clue. Just because, you know, once again, 5th grade, 1st grade, you know, you're just not privy to those things unless like an adult says something, or, you know what I mean? Because you just focus on like the actual what's happening on your TV screen, but not the specific details of where it's at, you know what I mean? What location, you know, those things didn't become apparent until way later.
do you think that at that age, let's say you did find out like WCW's here. Oh, it's right here at the Forum. Oh, I'm only that close. Oh, and the tickets, you know, in the early 90s, they were trying to fill that place up. Do you think you would have done whatever it took to get in there? Or?
Oh, absolutely. I was
Okay.
definitely that fan. I was
Yeah.
definitely that fan. I would have definitely done whatever it took to be there, to be in the house, to be a part of it. You know, I was the type of kid that when I was in school, same school, Kelso Elementary, 5 years old, right? I would always get in trouble for beating up the dolls in the class because it reminded me of the wrestling buddies. And I
Yeah.
had wrestling buddies of my own, but we had like this kind of Raggedy Ann looking dolls about this big, right? So every time the teacher wasn't looking, you know, before nap time, before stories, before all that, I would find my way over to where those little stuffed animals was, and I'll give a couple cheap shots real quick. I'll try to stab it on the mat, and the teacher would always yell at me like, "Brian, put that down, put that down." Stop doing that, like at least 3 to 4 times a day. You know, it's the thing. So I'm over there. I was body slamming a Raggedy Ann doll, you know, like back in kindergarten, man. So that was me.
Now, did you get that from wrestling? Like the teacher turned around? Is that something you picked up when you saw the wrestlers do that when the referee turned around? Is that
You know what? You know what? No, I only did that because I knew that I would get in trouble if she directly saw me doing it.
okay?
So I had to do it behind her back in order to get a couple licks in, you know, because it got to the point where as soon as she saw me go towards it or saw it with, you know, with it in my hands, she already knew, stop it. She knew what I was going to do. Like I hadn't gotten busted too many times already. So it got to the point where I had to see, I was a heel even back in kindergarten.
Yeah.
You know, I had to gouge the eyes real quick before, you know, the teacher would turn around.
I was like you took the words out of my mouth. I was gonna say you weren't only training, you were specifically trained to be a heel right there.
Right. Exactly. And then had to play it off, had to beg off, like, no, I didn't touch it. Yeah. I didn't touch it. No.
and then the referee had too much. Then you had to deal with Jack Tunney, aka the principal.
The principal, right? Exactly. So I knew I had to stop messing around because it probably wouldn't have been a good look being suspended from school already in kindergarten. You know, that wasn't a good look. But hey, at least I wasn't beating up the other kids.
That's true, man. That's true, man. So I hope they didn't take the dolls away because now you got human beings to.
Right.
Yeah. So okay. So getting back to going to the shows or not really being privy yet because you're young and I understand I was the same boat for certain shows. When did you find out about, or when did you decide, and what got you your path into becoming a wrestler? Like what was that avenue? Oh, here's something where I can actually train. How did that come about for you?
Right. Well, it all started with me going to the shows around that time, which I was talking about like around 05, 06. Well, actually, no, that's this will be a little bit later. That was the first time that I started going to the shows, but I had been going over the course of the years. So around 2008, I would say, I was attending events at Staples Center. You know, every time they came to town, I would go. Yeah. So I got the flyer for the Santino Bros Wrestling Academy after attending one of these events. I believe it was a Monday Night Raw taping at Staples Center. So that's what kind of sparked my interest into actually wanting to do it for myself, because up until that point, I didn't even realize that there was a school to go train to wrestle. Like I had no idea that there was wrestling schools out. I didn't really even know about a lot of the independent shows that was going on in Southern California at the time. You know, obviously I knew of XPW, but that was really about it up until that point. So once I got the flyer to train, it just sat around the house, you know, and like it wasn't like a club flyer. You know, when you leave the club after you finish partying and they come and flyer you for the next party or whatever, and you look at it like, what is this? Oh, some party, you know, somebody's promoting, then you throw it away before you even get to the car. You know, it was a situation like that. But since it said Wrestling Academy, I was like, wrestling? Oh, okay. And it was like one of those deals where I put it in my pocket and kept it and let it kind of just like float around just because it had wrestling on it, you know. But its presence and being around me from the time that I got that flyer to the time that I decided to call the school and join, its presence, each time I saw it laying around the house, I would pick it up, look at it, move it to a different spot of the house, and just, you know, kind of et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. Every time I did that, it kind of sparked the idea. And I thought to myself, well, what if? You know, so every single time that feeling and that instinct got stronger and stronger. So eventually it got to the point where, well, I wasn't going to throw it away because it was wrestling oriented. And those thoughts kept getting more and more, you know, just broader in my mind and present and privy to my consciousness. So yeah, man, I picked up the phone, I called the number, and I talked to Joey Chaos, the head trainer at Santino Bros Wrestling Academy, for the first time, and we worked it out for me to come to orientation, and the rest was history.
Okay, and then you're going back. This is right, 2008.
This was in 2008. That's correct. In March 2008 was when I joined the school.
Now, okay, and that was ironically that was the same year. The relaunch, the original relaunch without Rob Black, but the original relaunch of XPW Cold Day in Hell.
That's correct.
You were
a student. Yeah.
You were a Santino student at that time.
That's correct.
Okay,
yeah.
So that show took place in May of 2008. So we're talking pretty early 2008 you joined up with Santino.
March 2008. So 2 months.
Yeah.
In there 2 months.
So you were fresh, man. You were would you say you were green still?
I was absolutely green. But I had an undeniable will and passion to succeed. At that point, I already knew that it was going to be my path, and I had already made the conscious decision within myself to train hard and train to be the best. And I was already on that path, and that show was a real eye-opener for me. It was the first time actually being behind the scenes of a show like that with a lot of guys on it for the first time that were stars, you know, in my opinion, that I looked up to, that I've watched, you know, before, and whatever the case may be. Just that was my first actual contact or interaction with a lot of guys. Like X-Pac was on that card, New Jack, rest in peace. You know, the list goes on, Sandman, Sabu, you know, and just so many different guys that that I knew, that it was just like, it was an eye opener for me. Like, wow, okay, this is something that I could potentially do and be a peer to a lot of these guys that I looked up to for so long.
Wow, yeah, because that was for to do something like that only 2 months into the business was I can imagine like that. Oh wow, you know, like this is in Big Vision Entertainment at the time, who produced Wrestling Society X on MTV. They were behind it, so there was some big money. That unfortunately happened right before the crash of 2008, because that was to be the test pilot for a monthly pay-per-views, like how Impact started out, you know.
Exactly. The weekly pay-per-views down in Nashville, right?
But it just, you know, the timing couldn't have been worse. Before we get into that, as far as, because now, you know, you had a Cold Day in Hell, you were there behind the scenes, but then we had the 10-year reunion show a year later in 2009. But before we get into that, talk a little bit about working the local scene, the SoCal scene, and what companies you were working for when you first started, and when was that?
Gotcha. Okay, so I debuted in January 2009 was my debut. And that was in Newhall, California, where we were doing the Evo-Lucha shows. You know, the Santino Bros Wrestling Academy. We put our own show together where it was a show for the students, but it was a show for the fans to showcase the talent of the students that had graduated. Because, you know, I was I was in the original class, the first class of Santino Bros Wrestling Academy. So yeah, we did our first show in Newhall. Evo-Lucha is what we called it, and that's when I debuted, man. And then from there, you know, Joey Chaos, he always pushed us to go outside and venture outside of the school and venture out and just make a name for yourself. That's you know, repetition in the ring, and you know, all those things. And what it takes is, you know, you got to market yourself, you know, out of sight, out of mind, all those things. So I took a trip down to SoCal Pro. You'll probably remember this.
Yeah.
I jumped in the car with a guy named Kris Kloss.
Yeah.
And our other buddy, referee Eric. So we went down to SoCal Pro, and you know, I just jumped in the car with you guys, man. Just, you know, looking to venture out and get bookings and things like that. So the first guy I talked to down in SoCal Pro was Adam Pearce.
Okay.
So I talked with Adam Pearce, and you know, they didn't have anything that night, but I ran into Anchors Away that had been watching a lot of the training videos and things like that. And they offered me a spot to come down to wrestle at New Wave. So even though I didn't get booked that night, I ended up talking to Anchors Away, man. And, you know, they offered me a spot to actually, you know, come down and work New Wave, you know, in San Diego, a little bit further down than Oceanside. But that was my first actual booking that I got, you know, on my own, you know, just going out and networking. And it just continued to go from there. You know, I went down there and was able to impress New Wave, and, you know, was invited back, you know, to wrestle SoCal Crazy, who was definitely a legend in California. You know, and I'm just going down to the NWA TV tapings and things like that, and just showing face and helping out and things like that. And I was able to get booked on that show. And the first TV taping I had, which was no more than like 5-6 months of me being into the business. I wrestled Willie Mack for the first time, and then and then it's 2-minute match, 2-minute TV squash match. And, you know, I come back the next month, and Adam Pearce booked me against Austin Aries, a 10-minute match. So that pretty much got the ball rolling for me when I was able to get in there with Austin and have a really good match. Being, you know, no more than 6-7 months in the business, I knew that it was going to be a long career, a good ride, you know. So yeah, so that was some of the early matches that I had, man.
Amazing, man. And then, so like you said, you got the ball rolling pretty good. The origins, what are the origins, and how did you come up with the name Famous B?
Famous B. Okay, so I came up with the name during training. You know, we're getting ready to graduate, and, you know, everything's feeling good. I'm feeling good in the ring. And we're working on character development. Yeah. And I always envisioned myself being famous, doing something that had to do with entertaining. When I was younger, like around high school, you know, I always wanted to rap. I played basketball in high school. A fun fact, I went to high school and graduated, well, actually middle school as well, with current Lakers star Trevor Ariza. Oh. So yeah, so we went to middle school and high school together.
Dang, man.
And yeah, and I was on the best.
You have a lot of connections to the Lakers. And like I said, the Showtime era.
Right, the Showtime era, and then going to school with a buddy who actually ended up winning a ring and championship with the Lakers, with Kobe. You know, so yeah, man, a lot of connections. So back in high school, you know, I played ball, you know, so yeah, I always loved being in front of the crowd. Like, I knew then that, you know, I had the energy that just connected with the public, or like being in a public setting. I'm very creative, very talented in terms of, like, I like to entertain, act, sing, you know, rap, things like that. And one of the initial things that I wanted to do around that time in high school was to rap, actually be a rapper. So, you know, getting back to the point that I was making of how I came up with the name Famous B is, so when I thought about it for character development, and like what kind of persona would I want to have in a professional wrestling industry, the only thing I could think of was, well, I'm going to be famous. It doesn't matter what the case may be. I'm going to be famous. So I'm famous. And then B, you know, is the initial for my first name, Brian. So I just ran with Famous B. And the moniker was, you know, I could have been an actor. I could have been a basketball player. I could have been a rapper, but I chose to be a professional wrestler. And that's what makes me famous, kind of deal, you know? So I just took that and ran with it. And man, like, I've gotten that name in a lot of different places all around the world. So couldn't be any happier.
And in some ways that's actually true. You are to be a professional wrestler, man. So yeah, exactly, dude.
Yes.
So okay, so working the local scene, you know, basically getting your feet wet down Oceanside, then
Right.
ultimately San Diego, and then
Right.
you got into. Now, was that the first time you mentioned NWA and the TV tapings? Was that the first
Correct.
time that you were a part of an event that you knew was okay, a little bit bigger than just the people in the audience? This is okay. We got TV cameras. We got this, that, and the
Right.
other.
Right. No, absolutely. Definitely. That was the first time. Just having that experience and getting that experience with the production of an event, the production of a wrestling show, and just understanding cameras and angles and understanding that your audience is not the actual audience that's sitting there, but your audience is the hard cam, the
Right,
television camera,
right.
and getting accustomed to that
Yeah,
versus being in the moment and projecting your performance to the actual audience that's in
right.
the building was the first experience that I had with that. But fortunate for myself, we was always trained for that. We have the trainers down at Santino Brothers, they prepared us for this. And I was ready for the challenge, and that was the first time. And I would say I hit it out the park, but pretty much because I was well prepared for it.
Yeah, shout out to Joey and Mongol and all those guys because, like you said, I mean, they were showing you not only how to be a professional wrestling, but they were showing you how to be a television performer also.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah,
And there was so many different the dynamics of the Santino brothers was interesting because we had a lot of different trainers, and each trainer had their own specific niche.
yeah,
And you could take a little bit from each one of them. You know what I mean?
yeah.
We had the Godfather Santino brothers, Supreme, rest in peace, Supreme, who was very tough. He was a tough, he instilled the toughness, the physicality, the brutality in you.
Yeah.
And then you had Joey, who instilled the hard work, the ethics, the never say die aspect. And then you had Angel, who was more of the character, the bringing the
Right.
character out of you, the
Yeah.
the just who are you, and putting that character into not
Mm.
only what you're doing, into the moves, you know what I mean, but actually bringing the character out as well.
Wow.
And also Lucha too, he was very
Right.
efficient with Lucha, so I learned a lot of Lucha and got booked doing a lot of Lucha shows, which was actually a major help to me, in the beginning of my career. But we had other guys as well, but that's just to give you like a little bit of what I mean in terms of the variety that we had all coming at us at one
Yeah.
time. So I was just soaking everything up from all angles like a sponge. I was just learning everything from everybody and taking bits and pieces and kind of molding it all together to make like myself complete and who I would eventually become.
And knowing you, my friend, as a person outside of wrestling, um, you are very aware and conscious, and I will attest and validate that for sure. And I can only see you doing that same thing in regards to whatever is in your life, and pro wrestling being one of those things. Um, and you're one of those guys too in the business that I can hang out with, and I almost like I almost forget that that's how we know each other. We can totally
Right.
separate that. I can't do that with everybody in wrestling, but
Right.
there's some that I can, and you're like that. But
Thank you. Thank you.
oh yeah, I remember we were hanging out one time, and something reminded me of WCW Saturday Night, and we were in Vegas, and we were, had a few, and I'm like,
Yeah.
you remember that show WCW Saturday Night? And you looked at me like, of course, 305,
Right.
605,
605, yeah,
and I'm like,
305
oh yeah,
TBS.
we're both in wrestling. Why am I asking you that? Of course you know.
Because we have such a natural connection as human beings,
Right,
and
right.
that's what I appreciate. That's what I appreciate
That's what I'm saying.
amongst everybody that I come in contact with.
That's it.
And I like to, I have a moniker that I like to use. Well, actually, this is my personal truth. It's like, yes, I'm a wrestler, but I'm a human being first. The wrestler doesn't make the person I am. The person that I am happens to wrestle. You know, so that's always first and foremost, is the human being that I am takes precedent no matter where I'm at, no matter what circumstance.
Right.
It doesn't matter what kind of interaction or where it's from. If we're having an interaction, you're gonna be talking to the person that I am.
That's right. So. That's a different on TV. That's a different person. Right?
Absolutely. Completely different person. And that night when you said that, it was, we were playing a VR, PlayStation VR. That's what it was.
Yep, that's right.
And that's when you said that.
Yeah, Tropicana, Las Vegas Casino, man.
Yes.
So okay. Yeah, dude. So you were getting your feet wet pretty fast then at this point, because like you said, you started in 2000, officially 2008. Got the experience backstage, Cold Day in Hell. You got NWA TV tapings, working different shows, San Diego, all throughout Southern California.
Right.
Okay, so then you were a part of XPW in July of or August, somewhere around there, of 2009, which ended up being the 10-year reunion show, XPWX, or 10, Roman numeral X, XPW 10, 10-year reunion show. And you were a part of that. Talk a little bit about that, because we were trying to keep it going, if you remember, because the crash of 08, it wasn't quite the same backing that we had for Cold Day in Hell, but we had Mike Hartsfield, Kevin Kleinrock. We were trying to work. Not necessarily, we got a little bit of help from Big Vision, but they weren't totally behind it. But again, it was a big show. There's a fan interest and all that. And you're a year in now. Talk a little bit about that experience, if you don't mind.
Oh, it was a great experience, man. This was everything really coming full circle for me, because it was my opportunity to be on a show where my trainers made a name for themselves.
True. Yeah.
So for me to have the opportunity to work on a show in which, you know, like for me, like once again, going back to prior to me going to shows in the area, I knew of XPW. I used to go and I used to buy DVDs of XPW back when it was Music Warehouse at the South Bay Galleria, you know, which turned into FYE and and just, you know, I was always in the malls that, like, you know, just at the DVD store, just buying them if they were on sale or whatever the case may be. So I was a huge collector.
Yeah.
So, XPW was the first show that it was like, wow, okay, I'm a fan of this show. Now I'm on it.
Okay.
You know, so that was the first, like, kind of like realization for myself that it's like, wow, I'm here. You know, I'm here doing something so cool, you know, on a show that, you know, it's like, wow, like, you know, I used to buy these DVDs. Now I'm on the show. And not only that, you know, this is where my trainers were born. You know, these are where they're from, you know. So I felt like the grandchild of XPW, you know, coming to blossom, you know, in front of the world, you know, to continue to blossom, I should say, you know, on that stage. So it's just the magic, the aura of it. And then also too, going back to being just a student at Cold Day in Hell, XPW, you know, when I got the first taste, you know, obviously I wasn't on that show. I was just a stagehand, you know, and just, you know, coming out and just being a part of the ring crew. But now the next time around, now I'm on the show. So I'm super pumped up. You know, I was ready to rock and roll, and man, what a feeling, man. What a night. And just, oh man, that's one of the matches that I'll just never forget, or times I will never forget.
And were you the opener, right?
I was the second match.
Okay.
There was a match before me, and then I came on second.
Were you involved? Were you in the match with Chimera?
I was, yes. I was.
Okay, yeah, because now for those of you, this is shortly before Alberto Del Rio. He became Alberto Del Rio's ring announcer, Ricardo Rodriguez. But he was, I mean, we all went back with that guy, Chimera. He was on the indie scene, and it was very interesting how he fell into that role as the ring announcer. Really, but it's just stranger things have happened in wrestling. But yeah, that was right before he went off, and he was a part of that. And I remember talking to him, believe it or not, at the time, he shared the same sentiments you are, saying that he grew up watching it. It was awesome to be a part and all that. But okay, so unfortunately at the time that was basically the end of XPW 2.0. But then Mike Hartsfield continued on with MexPW,
yes.
which because of legal reasons, he had to change the name from MexPW to MexPro because it was there were some court battles with Big Vision's owners for the name. It was too close to sounding like XPW, if you remember that. But you were involved with that a little bit too, right?
Yeah, I was involved with that a lot of bit.
That's right,
yeah. Oh man, shout out Mike Hartsfield, man.
Yeah.
Mike has always been like just so supportive of me and so nice.
Yes.
In terms of my interactions and dealings with him, man. What a gentleman, man. Definitely, definitely look up to him and respect everything that he's done in the business and done with MexPro. So yeah, XPW, it was interesting because, obviously it was a startup. So you needed a champion. So we had this big tournament with some of the greatest that you could find in SoCal. I mean, some of the absolute greatest. And I'm proud to say that your boy won that tournament and became the first ever MexPW, MexPro heavyweight champion. And yeah, man, it was a gruesome tournament. Legends in there, and just like the who's who. B-boy, you had you had Joey Ryan, you had just so many guys that was in that tournament. But I was able to become the first ever MexPro heavyweight champion, in which I kept that title all the way until I dropped it to the Messiah, to Billy.
That's right.
Billy Messiah.
Isn't it that, like, I like pointing this out, man, because it's amazing how far you came in such a small amount of time, dude. Like, it's pretty awesome, dude. And looking back at all this in retrospect, and yes, you and Messiah, that was the title switch. And then, the league, just a lot of rocky stuff going on right there, unfortunately, timing wise, as far as business in the back. No one's fault, really. But then we did a show, and I forget who you went against or what your involvement was exactly. But going back to Kevin Kleinrock, you and I were involved in a show, Lucha Las Vegas.
Lucha Las Vegas. That's right.
Rio.
At the Rio in Las Vegas.
Relates to his company, Mass Republic, which he's doing a lot of great stuff with that. But that was basically considered the pilot for what would have been a series right there. But we had known each other already, you and I didn't know you were on the show. You didn't know I was, and we saw, oh, hey, what's up? And you talk a little bit about that and your involvement in that show?
Yeah, Lucha Las Vegas was awesome. I mean, like you said, right there in Rio, another big show for me. Obviously I'm doing it in a different city, LA boy now, doing a big show in Las Vegas in a very popular hotel. Man. And I just remember just having such a blast with the concept, and shout out Kevin Kleinrock too. I definitely want to shout him out because he has been very instrumental in my career in terms of like just absolutely, man. Just recommending me to different places, different promoters, recommending me to guys like Conan and AAA, in which I've done like several tryouts for AAA earlier in my career, and which, I would have like a long lasting friendship with Conan, from that point on. And going up north to PWR with Gabe Ramirez and things like that. That was a Kevin Kleinrock call. So definitely shout out to Kevin. But yeah, Lucha Las Vegas, man, was so much fun. It was a different because it's Vegas, right? So you have to get creative in terms of your match presentation and your style. And yes, it was lucha, but it was also entertainment. So, I just remember different gimmicks, outside of my match that he had, and just people he brought in, like Trina Michaels, and which is a very cool girl, that met for the first time at that point. And just different interactions or whatnot. But yeah, that was one of the first times I wrestled TJ Perkins.
Yeah,
we were in a 6-man tag on that show. So yeah, and we've gone on to have plenty other battles, but yeah, that was the first time that we hooked it up for the first time. So yeah, man, got to wrestle some pretty amazing people very early on to start my career.
Unbelievable. I mean, really. I mean, like you said, you going back to XPW 10, the Messiah, or I mean, going back to MexPro, the Messiah, and starting out wrestling in a match with Chimera, and then like you said, and then you're only a few years into it at this point,
right?
And then Lucha Las Vegas rolls around. It's a different, like you said, that's a great way to put it. I agree. It was like Lucha, but again, you're in Vegas, so it's Lucha. But you're also, it's just an entertainment show, even more so than pro wrestling normally was at the time.
Right.
And boy, a lot of great experience right there. So many different aspects of pro wrestling you're getting involved in, sounds like, in a short amount of time.
Right.
Now, speaking of, you talked about Chaos, Supreme, Angel. Were you involved? Did you have involvement in what was it exactly? Lucha VaVoom?
Yes. Right. I did a couple of different characters for Lucha VaVoom. Right. Yeah. Well, we were the Voodoo Tribe, me and Chaos, and and New York Knockout, Nikki.
That's it. Yeah. That's it.
Yeah, for their Halloween shows where we wrestled the Crazy Chickens.
Yes.
So so I had a lot of fun with that over at the Mayan Theater, in downtown Los Angeles. I mean, who's not gonna have fun doing that show? That show is so fun, and the crowd it's a different type of lucha crowd.
Yeah.
So they're more into your character, your gimmick, and things like that, versus actually the moves and what you're actually doing in the ring. Now, don't get me wrong. Of course, they respect it, and of course, they're entertained by it. But they love to see the dances, the songs in between the matches, and things like that. So getting to be a voodoo child and dressing up with the paint and all that stuff, and it was very Papa Shango-ish.
Yes.
And going up against the Crazy Chickens and things like that, which is the crowd favorite, was definitely awesome. This was in the midst of when I debuted for the first time at PWG, which was another accolade of mine, debuting at Pro Wrestling Guerrilla, just maybe 2.5 years into starting. I did a tour with Lucha VaVoom where we went to Canada. So we went to Canada. We flew out on Thursday. I wrestled twice on Friday, twice on Saturday, flew back on Sunday, and then wrestled PWG on Sunday morning for the convention, for a WrestleCon convention, and then did LCW a Sunday night in East LA.
Wow.
So yeah, so that's what, so 6 matches, 3 days, 2 different continents.
That's awesome, dude. LCW Boyle Heights, is that right?
That's East Los Angeles.
Boyle Heights. You're right.
Yep.
Okay.
At the Casa, where they did the old movie,
right. Yeah,
back in the day.
Man, I was at that show that you were on with when I was announcing with Shane Douglas.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
The deathmatch tournament.
Yes, right.
Yes, okay. The connection. Yeah, that was the connection. LCW and the deathmatch tournament where Shane Douglas came out. I believe we had Balls Mahoney came out for that.
That's right.
I had a ladder match. I think I'm pretty sure I had like some sort of crazy TLC match of myself, Little Cholo, and a couple other guys in there. It was wild. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, dude, man, like I knowing you and hanging out with you at that time, like I kind of started forgetting how fresh you were in the business, dude. You kind of came in, and then after only a few years, it was like it felt like you were already like established guy, and you were, right? You were. What I'm saying is, and it's a compliment.
Thank you.
I forgot how recent you had come into the business, and again, that's only a compliment because you don't feel like you feel like you get it. You don't feel green at all at that point. I mean, we can all of us, and I tell young guys, there's never a time when you can't learn anymore. Like you can always learn more, and you should get excited about learning more, really. But what I'm saying is, we can all learn more. but yeah, it felt like that with you, man. It felt like, oh yeah, gee, man, he's been, you know, he's been around and he's done it and all this. Now, speaking of doing it all and getting these opportunities, and speaking of Boyle Heights, another big shot you got, which I think was really big for your career to put you on the map. And I remember seeing this, hearing about it, like, okay, this is good. Yes, this is awesome. Was when you got picked up for Lucha Underground.
Right.
Talk a little bit about that, when that happened, and how it unfolded for you.
Okay, yeah, sure. So Lucha Underground was pretty special. It was a special case.
Yeah.
Before that, I just want to backtrack real quick. Right before that, I did accomplish a couple of amazing things. One being one of the top 500 for PWI in 2012. Yeah. So I debuted on the list for the first time at number 255, right in the middle of the list. So I was really stoked and excited about that. This was an era where, you know, I was going back and forth to Mexico, and I had like about 4 different titles at once. And, you know, I really just was on cloud 9. You know what I mean? I had the West Coast Heavyweight Championship, the DCW Heavyweight.
Wait. Let's not get carried away. You weren't on cloud 9. You were on cloud 255. Let's not get carried away.
Yes. It would start with a 2, right? It would start with a 2. But yeah, man, I'm just traveling everywhere and just collecting titles left and right, and just really feeling amazing about myself and really rocking and rolling. And then I did this show. I don't know if a lot of people out there remember, but this was a pay-per-view that we did in New York called the Urban Wrestling Federation. Mm-hmm. Now, this was started by Steve O'Neill, a guy who worked under Paul Heyman during the ECW era. And what this was Kevin Kleinrock was also involved with this as well. So, you know, he can attest to a lot of the happenings of the Urban Wrestling Federation. But it was a stint that we did that only was featured on pay-per-view, where they brought in different rappers from different parts of the states and different wrestlers. And each, you know, rapper had different cliques and whatever the case may be. And this is a project that they only promoted on pay-per-view. So having that experience and wrestling already in the Hammerstein Ballroom Arena and things like that, where they did the old school Monday Night Raw when it first debuted and things like that, the same building. Coming off that kind of increased my level of just how to work the camera and just being on TV.
Yeah.
So between the NWA and between the Urban Wrestling Federation, now it's like, okay, yeah, now it's time to start knocking on people's doors. Now it's time to go to the big time. Now it's time to start getting those tryouts with WWE and whatnot. So it's funny. So when I first got the call for Lucha Underground, that same week I had a tryout for WWE. Now, I had already previously had a tryout with WWE a couple years prior to this, right? Okay. So I wouldn't say my first tryout was very good. I wouldn't say it was very bad. I would say that it's right in the middle, in a sense of this was my first time going there. So I really didn't know what to expect. So I kind of just went with the flow of everything. And I wasn't as assertive as I could have been in terms of asking questions, talking to the right people, whatever the case may be. I was more of just observing how it works, you know, what's happening, what's going on, because that's how I am. You know, I like to take things in before I just really go and jump out on a limb. You know what I mean? Because I like to know if there's water in the pool before I jump in it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And anyone that knows you knows that about you.
Yeah. Absolutely. So it was one of those things where, in hindsight, after the fact, I started to internally process in my own head what I could have done better, what you know, basically what I would do the next time had I got this opportunity again, right?
Right. Yeah.
So a couple of years later, I finally get this opportunity to do so. I go in, I have a clear vision of exactly what I want to do, how I want to present myself, the whole 9. It happened to be a weekend where William Regal, he was actually sick and didn't make the trip. Now, if you don't know out there, William Regal is what was a large part of looking at the talent before the taping start and assessing their work. You know what I mean? Like if their work, if they want to sign you or not, whatever the case may be, and all that good stuff. Evaluation, I guess you can say. So he happened to miss that weekend, but we still got a chance to do tryout matches. And Mark Henry, at the time, Mark Carano, Big Show, and a few other people were the ones that was evaluating the talent. Now, me, I had 100% confidence. I went in there firing on all cylinders and just really making good on the little details that I told myself, had I get another shot, this is what I would do different. So that time I went in and totally tore it apart, man. Totally tore it apart, man. Had a very good tryout and audition for them. And I ended up talking to Mark Henry after the fact. And he goes, look, he was like, we had 5 out of 5 guys evaluating. All 5 liked you. We just think you're a little too small. So he goes, and this, and mind you too, this was like about maybe 2 years before they brought in a cruiserweight tournament.
Can I just interject and please continue? Sure. We had a conversation last time I saw you in Vegas, and I remember I just want to throw this in really quick about me, go right back to you. But I had the same comment thrown at me for being an announcer. You're just a little too tall. Unbelievable. Yeah.
Wow. Look at how parallel we are.
I do, you know. Seriously, man.
So is it right? It's just a one little detail, right?
I'll give you some of my height, and please take it away, and please,
yeah, right. Will be the perfect.
But please continue, man. I just had to throw that in, but please.
No, so basically, that went to the conversation of we want you to gain about another 20 pounds muscle or whatnot, and come back and give it another shot.
Okay.
So, there was nothing standing in the way but me and 20 pounds, having a future there. That same week is when I got the call to audition for Lucha Underground. So this was on a Monday, Tuesday that I had this talk with WWE. I had a phone conversation with Chris DeJoseph, who was the head writer for Lucha Underground, on Thursday that same week. And I went and auditioned Friday morning for Lucha Underground. So I go and audition. They give me 2 different characters to audition for, or lines for 2 different characters. I go and I audition with Chris DeJoseph and Matt, who was another writer at the time. And I just remember, they gave me about 15 minutes to look over the scripts. And I go and I speak to them, introduce myself and all this. And I audition, and the audition went great. Like, I just remember nailing the parts and just being really exuding a lot of confidence in what I was saying, what I was delivering, what I was doing. They said, okay, we want to see you deliver this character. So I'll deliver this character and go, recite my lines for this character. Then I do the next character. And then they say, okay, now do the same thing as Famous B, like as who I am, as my own character. So I do that, and I just remember it being a good audition, because I remember as I'm delivering my characters or saying my lines, I just remember DeJoseph, he was looking at me with a smile on his face like this, like, yeah. So I knew I had it, hook, line, and sinker,
Hey, man.
Yeah. So I auditioned. It was great, and then they called me back like I think 2 or 3 hours later after I left the audition.
Whoa.
And then, they offered me the part, for one of the characters on Lucha Underground. And and the rest was history. So what
year was this?
This was in 2014.
2014. Okay. So now did you go in there like, oh, I don't think they're going to let me use my name, or did you have an idea that they probably would, or
you know what? No, like I went in there like an actor would, auditioning for a role in a movie.
Yeah.
That's pretty much what it was. Like, I was very privy to the fact that this wasn't a wrestling promotion, more or less a television show that's about wrestling.
Yes.
So, and especially too, when first of all, I had to audition. Normally, if this was a wrestling event, you know, your audition would be in the ring before a match or something like this. If that would be my audition. But the fact I went into like a television like studio and recited like an actual script, that let me know right then and there that I'm auditioning for a role. And actually, the role that they wanted to cast me in was a character that never came to fruition on Lucha Underground. And that's the reason why season 1, I was used as myself, which was basically used as an enhancement talent.
Yep.
For a lot of the guys that they were getting over, like the Pentagons. You know, I was one of the first to do get my arm broken on that show, and which was a staple for him and his character. I was one of the first ones to get the lick of death from Katrina, and getting Mil Mortis character over. So that's what they used me for, as they were trying to find, I guess you could say, scripts or roles for the character that I was going to play. It was a pretty interesting character. I had gotten fitted for it. I had a nice outfit, the whole 9, but that never came to fruition. And between season 1 and season 2, they kind of scrapped that character and said, well, since we've been using Famous B, my independent wrestling character, on the show as an enhancement talent, what can we do to make Famous B a character on the show? And that's when Joseph came up with the 423 Get Fame gimmick. And between season 1 and between season 2, that's when we kind of finalized it, and they talked to me about it. And I was on board, and, you know, the rest was history from there. So it's kind of by chance that I was able to keep my name, Famous B, and continue to be Famous B on a show that was producing characters that were original to the show.
I remember watching that, and I'm like, I want to ask him how that happened, because that was a stroke of fortune right there, I thought, for you. And at the time, before I talked to you about it, I didn't know what the background was with that. So I didn't know. I'm like, did he just get lucky and they let him keep the name, or was that something they wanted? But very interesting, dude. And I got to ask you, this is a very important question. And not only yourself, but everybody that was working on that production.
Mm-hmm.
There had to be so much, all of you guys had to be riddled with so much guilt and so much weight on your shoulder, performing at Lucha Underground, knowing that you stole that from WSX.
Well, just because they brought in Jack Evans doesn't mean we stole it from WSX.
I'm just kidding, but I had to throw that in there. I'm sorry.
No. Oh man, a lot of similarities, right? The old school warehouse in downtown.
Yes,
just so many similarities.
And man. I'm totally kidding. It's wrestling, man. Everything is
everything is recycled, right?
That's it, man.
I can't tell you, since the 423 Get Fame character that I've done on Lucha Underground, how many times that character has already been recycled. We've seen a ton of times that character has been recycled.
Totally, man. Totally.
Before this, there really wasn't any managers at all on other TV shows, like in WWE or whatever the case may be. Now you see an influx of managers everywhere.
Yeah. Right.
I put the managers back on the map.
No, I mean, no joke, because at that time when you were doing that, in those promos that you were doing, like, that was a throwback in many ways.
Even all the way down to my outfit, the Jimmy Hart, where I had my clients on the back of my jacket, even myself. Obviously a throwback. Lucha Underground, they came to me one day and they said, we see you as our Bobby the Brain Heenan of the show.
Wow.
So they started having me doing commentary with Matt Stryker for dark matches. I started doing ring announcing alongside with Melissa Santos. When they brought in Shaw Guerrero, Eddie Guerrero's daughter, and I had that one segment at in the Ultima Lucha for our final season, season 4. Yeah. And we had that bit over the ring announcer or whatnot, which was a fun segment. Oh man, go back and watch that. And if you guys haven't, season 4, Lucha Underground, Ultima Lucha. a fun segment between myself and Shaw Guerrero, where I ended up getting 3 amigos and a frog splash. But you know, I'm not gonna hold no grudges. But yeah, man. So they had me doing all these things: wrestling, managing, ring announcing, commentating. They said, we see you as our Bobby the Brain Heenan, and I took that to heart. And you know, every time I went out there, you know, I just swung for the fences. Everything I did was all one take. I batted 1,000 in Lucha Underground. No retakes at all.
Right.
Not one retake at all. Everything was one take.
And I remember too, I mean, with XPW, but speaking of Wrestling Society X, like when that camera came on us, it was like, if we mess up, we mess up. But it was a big deal to take it over again. Like, ooh, we got to get it on one take, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And it's just having that wrestling mentality, like the show must go on. You know what I mean? Like if you flub something up or whatever the case may be, you don't stop and go back to it. You just keep going. You just keep going. But it's, you know, I'm just used to it. I'm just used to going there and doing my thing. There are no do-overs. There are no go-backs. And, you know, like, this character having heavy dialogue in the show, I took that same mentality and applied that, because it's one thing to do it in between during the match when you're doing moves, wrestling moves, but it's another thing to flub a line and having to clean that up and like, where do you go from here, or whatever the case may be. So I worked extra hard because I was using dialogue for my character. So it was just one of those things where like everything was magic. Like, you know, like I did a lot of improvisations, I guess you can say, like that just came out. Things just happened to come out organic. Like, you know, the skip that I did and like certain mannerisms I did was like just a little extra twist on what of the dialogue that they gave me, and like it just happened to be magic. It just happened to come out wild, you know. So they loved it. They loved everything I did with the character, because I think what they had envisioned for it, I took it and I pushed it an extra mile that you just can't write or make up. So they loved it.
You know, it's amazing, like you said. And Jesse Hernandez on the last episode of Cali's Finest, he reminded me, and something I'll always hold in high regard is working with Roddy Piper, and I was like the last guy that he worked with, because he died like 2 weeks after we shot a pilot up in Point Hueneme, and he was talking about, and Jesse Hernandez reminded me about this, the movie Body Slam in the 80s, right, with the guy Dirk Benedict from the A-Team, and it was Piper, the Samoans, Barbarian, and it was a pro wrestling movie, and they filmed certain segments at the LA Sports Arena, at different venues, and when the camera would cut, because it was just a movie, Piper and the Samoans like, dude, we got a crowd here. We're not. They kept it going, and the film crew's like, who cares about these 20, 50 people here? This is a major motion picture. You don't have to worry about it. But Piper was like, no way. We're doing this. We're doing this. And these weren't even wrestling fans. They were just paid extras. And he still kept the illusion going. And it's like you said, like, yeah, you can be involved in something in television, but it's only going to endear yourself to the TV people even more too. Like they don't have to worry about working with you in a way that they got to coax you for a take two and all that. You're going to navigate yourself through that. And again, you picked up a lot of that in a small amount of time, dude, which is kudos, good tributes to you. And, but yeah, man, that I get what you're saying. And guys like Jesse Hernandez from the old school, they would appreciate that now. And anybody young guys watching this, like, just because the business has changed and okay, kayfabe is dead or whatever, you can always get over on somebody. It's never totally dead, in my opinion.
Right. No, absolutely. And a lot of it has to do with how you carry yourself outside of the business as well. Yeah. You can have a persona in the wrestling business and you can make it whatever you want. But if you, the person, happens to go on social media per se, or in front of anyone else's eyes and express any kind of, I guess you can say, certain opinions of just who you are.
Yeah.
When it comes to dealing with certain things, situations, places, or topics, then it's kind of like it overlaps with that character. So you have to be conscientious of that. So that's why, like, you know, like in my case, a perfect example of that is I really don't say much on social media that does not have much to do with my character, Famous B. Because if you see Famous B 2323 on my Twitter account or whatever the case may be, then you can guarantee that is usually related to my wrestling character. Yeah. Now, if it's at Brian, then we're talking about the person in terms of how I present myself to the public or to the audience.
Right.
That's my level or measure of what kayfabe is or what it truly is. My social media is to promote who Famous B is, not myself. So it's interesting because, you know, when it comes to my like close personal relationships, I have to remind people of that. It's like, yeah, how come you haven't, you know, hit me up or this and that, or like this and that. But using social media, it's like, yeah, well, we have each other's numbers. We can talk on that level. Like, don't judge me, the person, on how often you see me or not see me on social media, because that's a totally different thing.
Two different people, man. And but yeah, man, going back to all that, before we wrap up here, and by the way, speaking of the LA Sports Arena, when you and I and our good friend Eric Malikian would hang out, I think fans would dig this. Like, I used to live downtown, and this is when you were just starting up. And you're right, we were hanging out. We went to the shows in Oceanside, but we would hang out, you know, not get into too much trouble, but we'd have a couple, get some late night food, and we would literally pull the car. I lived downtown. We get Chano's tacos. We'd have maybe a 12-pack or something, and but the sober one was driving. But we would literally, before they tore it down, we would get our food, get our drink, and drive. And there was this little gate that they kept open, and we literally would drive our car right up to the LA Sports Arena at like 1, 2, 3 a.m. in the morning.
Right in front of the sign.
Yeah. And we'd park, turn the music on, and just eat our food. And man, that was fun. And it was so iconic being there like that, you know?
Yeah, man. So much fun, man. It was kind of like we were our own tailgate. We were tailgating for the late nighters. That's what we were doing. We're having a great time.
Tailgating to see the custodians do their thing inside.
Absolutely, man. It's like, oh man, it's like times like that is just like, you know, those are the times that are priceless. Those are the times that are to be cherished and that will be remembered forever. Like, you know what I mean? Like, those are definitely good times. And, you know, it's just I'm sorry. I was just going to say really quick. It's just a testament to the wrestling business. And one of the things that I'm grateful for by being in the business is not only did I get to accomplish a lot of things and do some cool things career-wise, but I've also got to do some amazing things outside of the business because of the business, if that makes sense.
Right. Oh, yeah.
So I totally cherish every minute and every moment.
You know, and it's funny, like how you're talking about Brian and B, two different people. And look, this Kris Kloss is not the Kris Kloss you see on a wrestling show. And those nights hanging out, going to the sports arena, you know, it was iconic. We're doing that for our love for the business. But that was open the door for the real us, the Brian, the Kris Kloss you see now, to have that conversation about this thing that we love. From the place of the real person, not the character, and that just like shapes those experiences shape how, at least for me, how you're going to take that into the character.
Right.
You know?
Absolutely. And it comes back full circle. It comes back full circle to what we were talking about earlier in terms of sometimes you actually just forget about the business when you're having that conversation, because we already established who we were as people and we already opened ourselves up to having a great dynamic friendship And it doesn't have to just rely on just the business, but it starts with who we are as people. So that's why it's easy to forget when we're interacting as people. It's easy to forget about the business. So when we get back to doing something that has to do with the business, it's kind of like, you know how like when you wake up and you're real sleepy and you wake up all of a sudden out of your sleep and you're groggy eyed and you look around and you got to gain your bearings at first when you first wake up. That's kind of what it is, getting back into.
I'm coming out of a dream to go to this other dream, like this other person, this other world. Other world, man.
But it's awesome that we relate on both ways.
Yeah.
On both sides of the fence.
Yeah. And man, boy, it'd be like that was it was something else, because again, thank you for sharing all this. And for those that have requested you, we have a list of guys that, you know, on our Facebook, my Facebook, that people have requested for this show, and you were definitely one of those names. So thank you for shining some light on all that. And again, a testament to you that all the stuff you did in such a short amount of time in the first part of your career, very impressive. But before we close out, my friend, do you have any specific favorite matches or moments in your experience in wrestling in California?
Wow. I have a lot. It's a pretty broad list, because there were so many that just really, you know, just touched me. So I'll just throw a couple off, you know, off the top of my head. Wrestling Bobby Lashley was one. Back in 2014, I also wrestled Brutus the Barber Beefcake one-on-one. So that was pretty interesting to me, because going back to, you know, talking about how early I remember like a lot of the wrestlers, you know, from like the, you know, late 80s to early 90s. Obviously, he was one of the major ones, you know, when I was a child, you know, like, so getting in the ring with him, like, that was pretty special to me. My debut match at PWG, that was just so good. And, you know, the fans going crazy and banging on the ring, please come back, please come back.
Wow.
That was like one of the moments where like I literally had to like hold my tears in as my hand was getting raised by the ref, because it was working PWG to me is like going to college. I mean, it's graduating college. It's like getting your PhD in wrestling. It's like getting your degree. You know what I mean? It's like when you get on those shows and you get to work with the type of guys at that level, that's like you got your PhD in wrestling almost. So that was like, to me, that was like a night where like it was like a graduation from college night to me, you know, just to get that, you know, validation from not only my peers, but from the fans as well. That was one. Being in the ring with Shaw Guerrero, who I mentioned earlier, obviously, you know, growing up and idolizing her dad, Eddie, and working with Chavo Guerrero, working with the Guerreros, and you know, that means a lot to me. It's just so many different situations. Being in the ring and actually working Chavo and doing a main event, and I believe we were in San Diego around the time of Eddie's passing, the 10-year anniversary of his passing. We worked the main event, and Conan got in the ring at the end of the match or whatnot, and we just did like a, you know, paid homage to Eddie, and you know said his, you know, piece and all that with the crowd, and like had a message for Eddie. Like, that was very special. It's just been so many different moments that, like, so many titles won, so many moments, so many just things that I've gotten to do, so many countries I've gotten to travel to and meet amazing people from Australia to Canada to Mexico, like you know, all around the US, you know, East Coast to back and forth. It's just so many good moments. So I mean, that's just a couple that I could share with you guys off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure that there's many more, you know, if we had time. But
well, there's
a lot of things.
There's also many more to come, man, because you're a talent, and I think it's only a matter of time till we see some more of you, and you're deservedly so. And speaking of titles, B, was that the first title, MexPro, that you held? Was that your first?
No, it wasn't my first. It was one of my first, but it wasn't my first. Yeah, I had several. I had the IWL Anarchy Championship before that. West Coast Heavyweight Championship, the PWR Junior Heavyweight Championship. So I had a couple before.
Okay, cool. Well, dude, man, thank you again, brother, and always good catching up with you. Hopefully, I'll be out your way, and we can, this time we'll drive up to the T-Mobile Center at night.
Exactly right. That sounds good, man. That sounds like a plan right there.
Before we do close out, anything you want to plug or any shout outs, anything at all, man?
Man, shout out to Santino Bros Wrestling Academy, man. If it wasn't for them, I mean, they really just took their time with me and groomed me and just molded me into the professional that I am today. I learned a lot from my trainers. I have a lot of respect for them. So, if you're an aspiring wrestler out there, or, whatever the case may be, if you're doubting yourself or second guessing, or you're thinking maybe I should, or, whatever the case may be, it's like, just do it. Just do it. Just go out, jump out on that limb and just do it, because you never know until you try. And if you never try, you never know what may have come. So Santino Bros Wrestling Academy is definitely a school that I would encourage anybody in the Southern California area to go give a try. And definitely you could be the next one to be famous just like me.
That's right, man. And speaking of that, where can we find you, man? Where can we find you on the web?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Twitter at FamousB23. Also on Instagram at FamousB_23. And FamousB23 is also my YouTube name, or my name on YouTube, where you can search a lot of my previous matches that we just spoke about, and tons of content more. So, yeah, that's where you can find me out there on the net.
For everybody watching, for all the fans, for the Wrestling Chatter YouTube channel, this is Cali's finest. My name is Kris Kloss, and this right here is my guest, the one and only Famous B. Famous B, thank you, my friend. Good catching up.
Thank you. Appreciate you, man.
And we will see you down the road. Fans, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you on the 10th of every month for new episodes of Cali's finest right here on the Wrestling Chatter YouTube channel. Subscribe, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.